What would you do if your own parents stole your college dream? I got accepted into NYU, full ride, my dream school, and 5 minutes later, I found out the $95,000 saved for my tuition was gone. My parents emptied the college fund to buy a camper for their once-in-a-lifetime retirement road trip. No warning, just gone. They said, "You'll figure it out, you're smart." So I did. I worked for 3 years, community college by day, cleaning tables by night, until I bought the one thing they never expected, the house they promised I'd inherit. And when it went into foreclosure, I filed the paperwork, quietly, legally, no yelling, just signatures and deadlines. This video isn't about revenge, it's about reclaiming your power. If you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, don't scroll, because sometimes the loudest justice is silence and a signed deed. They always said the money was waiting. For college, sweetheart. Someday. That someday came on a Tuesday morning in April. I was folding laundry on the old plaid couch, the one with sun-faded arms and a broken spring on the left side, when the email from NYU lit up my phone screen. I didn't even finish folding the towel in my hands. It slid off my lap as I reached for the phone, heart skipping. I tapped the screen with fingers that suddenly felt too big. There it was, subject line, "Congratulations from NYU." I read it twice before I could believe it, then a third time just to feel it sink in. I laughed out loud, startling the cat off the windowsill. I'd done it. I was in. The folder I kept everything in, transcripts, essays, recommendation letters, was already out on the coffee table, next to 2 vanilla candles and a stack of mail. I sat cross-legged, still in my hoodie and socks, staring at the acceptance email like it was some kind of miracle. For a moment, I let myself believe everything would finally start falling into place. I could picture it. New York streets, coffee in hand, textbooks under my arm, finally studying social work like I dreamed of since I was 15. I called out, "Mom? Dad?" Footsteps came from the kitchen. My mom appeared first, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her eyebrows raised. "What is it?" "I got in," I said, holding up the phone. "NYU, full acceptance." My dad stepped in behind her. "Sweetheart, that's incredible." They hugged me, my mom's voice bright with pride, my dad patting my back a little too hard, like he didn't know what to say beyond, "Wow." I didn't notice it at the time, but neither of them asked what came next. Still grinning, I grabbed the folder. "So, I just need to get the tuition deposit in. First payment's due next week, and housing is..." My dad's smile faltered, just a flicker. Then he turned and reached for the stack of mail on the table, pretending to read something. My mom cleared her throat. "Why don't you give the bank a quick call, Jess, just to be sure everything's in order?" "Sure," I said, already dialing. I'd grown up knowing that account existed. The college fund, Dad called it. He used to joke about it when I was younger. "This house and that fund, yours when the time comes." The line rang. I held the phone between my cheek and shoulder, smoothing out the NYU letter with one hand. "Good morning, Miss Taylor," the bank rep said after verifying my details. "How can I help today?" "I'm calling to check the balance on my college fund account," I said. "The custodial one under Thomas Taylor?" A pause. Then, "That account was closed out about 7 months ago." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Closed. Let me double check." I could hear the clicking of a keyboard. Yes, total withdrawal was $93,000 and change, October of last year. The phone felt slippery in my hand. "Can you tell me where the funds went?" "I'm afraid I can't disclose that over the phone unless you're the custodian." "Thank you," I said, even though I barely heard my own voice. I hung up and looked at my parents. They weren't looking at me. My dad stared at the camper brochures on the table, one of them smeared with a coffee ring. My mom was fiddling with her bracelet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. "You took it," I said. My mom glanced up, startled. "Jess, you used my college fund." "We didn't think you'd get in," my dad said too quickly. "And it's not like the money's gone, it's just mobile now." "Mobile?" For the road trip, my mom added. You know how we always dreamed of it. Retirement's not far off, and with everything going on in the world, COVID, jobs, we figured it was now or never. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. My mom kept going. And you're smart, honey. You'll figure something out. New York University's just a school. But this trip? It's once in a lifetime. I walked to the window. Outside, in the driveway, sat a gleaming silver camper, polished like a promise. I stared at it, my reflection warped in its aluminum siding. There it was, $95,000, 14 years of planning, every someday they'd ever promised me, parked between the mailbox and the hydrangea bush. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless. In the corner of the living room, above the bookshelf, hung a framed drawing I'd made when I was 8, crayon on construction paper, stick figure me with a giant backpack, standing next to a sign that read, NYU or bust. I reached up and took it off the wall. The glass was cool against my palm. I walked past my parents without a word and climbed the stairs to my room. I didn't slam the door, I just closed it. Quietly. I sat on my bed and laid the drawing beside me. I didn't cry. Not then. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter from the TV downstairs, the kind of laugh track that plays no matter what the world outside feels like. And then, into the quiet, I whispered to myself, I'll find another way, without them. I used to think betrayal sounded like screaming, like shattering plates or slammed doors. Turns out, it sounds more like the low hum of a mini fridge in a shared apartment, the kind of buzz you forget until the silence makes it louder. By October, I'd memorized the sound of that fridge, the hiss of the radiator when it kicked on, the drip in the bathroom sink that never quite stopped, no matter how tightly you turn the knob. I was in a duplex on the edge of town, 2 stories of peeling paint and linoleum floors that curled at the corners. Rent was manageable, thanks to Danielle. She was older, in her last year of law school, and had a kind of blunt kindness that didn't ask for anything in return. We weren't friends exactly, more like survival allies. By day, I took classes at the community college. By night, I wiped down sticky tables at a cafe called Finch and Fable, where the espresso machine made more noise than tips. Some mornings I'd come home just as Danielle was leaving. Tote bag slung over one shoulder, coffee in a chipped mug, casebooks tucked under her arm. Sleep is for the dead, she'd say with a wink. I'd laugh even if I didn't feel it. One night, over shared ramen, my turn to cook, which meant boiling water and tearing seasoning packets, she looked up from her laptop and asked, "You ever look into FAFSA?" I shook my head. Didn't think I qualified. You'd be surprised, especially after what your folks pulled. She didn't say it with pity, just fact. I was still adjusting to how flat people's reactions could be once they stopped sugarcoating things. Danielle never sugarcoated anything. I can help you fill it out, she offered. Also, don't let them keep your name on anything. If they use that money to buy the camper and it's not paid off, that could come back on you. I blinked. Wait, how? Custodial accounts are weird. You might want to check the title on that thing. Could be leverage one day. Leverage. I turned that word over in my head for days. By Thanksgiving, I hadn't been home in nearly 4 months. But when my mom texted, "Dinner's at 5. Come if you want," something in me caved. Maybe it was nostalgia, or maybe it was the half-hearted hope that they'd changed. The camper was different, bigger now. Glossy decals on the side, a satellite dish perched like a crown. There was a small fire pit in the backyard and a cinnamon-scented candle burning near the sliding glass door. "Jess!" my mom called from the kitchen. "Look who's finally gracing us with her presence." Dad was in the recliner, TV remote in hand. "Good to see you, kiddo." Dinner was dry turkey and boxed stuffing, over-seasoned like they were trying too hard to impress. The table talk was the same. Weather, gas prices, who from church was moving to Florida. Barbara, the woman who raised me, who used to braid my hair before school, smiled across the table and said, "Well, at least you're learning to cook. That's more useful than half those college classes anyway." I sipped my water and said nothing. Later, while washing my hands in the bathroom, I caught a whiff of mildew. The walls were painted a warm beige, but the corners near the tub were gray with damp. Funny how things look perfect from a distance. I wandered into the spare room before leaving. That used to be my room. It still had the bookshelf, the desk, even some of my old books. But the closet was packed now with hiking boots and thermals. A stack of travel magazines sat beside the lamp. On the nightstand, a scrapbook. It was thick, with a leather cover and pressed leaves taped into the pages. I sat on the edge of the bed and flipped it open. October. First stop, Shenandoah. Photos of the camper parked under red trees. November, Blue Ridge Parkway. More photos, campfires, smiling selfies. There was no mention of me, not one. No empty spot labeled Jessica at NYU. No page left blank for a graduation. Just them, their journey, their story. I closed the book and stood up slowly. It was the first time I realized I wasn't part of the plan. Maybe I never was. Back at the apartment, I microwaved a hot dog and ate it straight from the paper towel. Danielle wasn't home, just the buzz of the fridge again, steady and low. Outside, the rain hit the windows in soft bursts, like fingertips. I opened my laptop and typed into the search bar, "How to buy foreclosed property in Pennsylvania." Turns out, revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't need fire or shouting. Sometimes it's just paperwork and patience, and a notary public. The letter came in a cream-colored envelope tucked into my mailbox between a grocery store flyer and a coupon booklet. I wasn't expecting anything that day, but the return address was from Lackawanna County Courthouse. At first, I thought it was jury duty, but it wasn't. It was a foreclosure notice. Public record sent to nearby residents. The address listed my childhood home, 148 Sycamore Lane, the one with the sagging porch swing and mailbox that still had the sticker, "The Taylors," peeling across the front. At first, I stared at the letter like it was written in a foreign language. I reread it twice before it settled in. Missed payments, delinquent taxes, auction scheduled in August if no action taken. I didn't call my parents. I didn't even consider it. Instead, I called Danielle. "Two things," I said. "First, I need to confirm a foreclosure case. Second, how do you submit a silent bid?" She whistled softly. "Damn, you serious?" "Dead." She walked me through the county website. We pulled up the tax lien history. Overdue since late 2021. Loan refinanced twice. A balloon payment due that spring, unpaid. They were running on fumes. I booked an appointment with the bank. Craig Watson, a local mortgage officer, met me at the branch. He looked like someone who still wore ties to family BBQs. He scanned the paperwork. "You're looking to bid at auction?" "Number why I want to buy it quietly. Before it goes public. You said the owner has a 30-day right of redemption, right?" He nodded slowly. "It's legal, but rare. You'd need to satisfy the lien, and then we'd notify the current deed holders. And if I do it through escrow, you'd remain anonymous until the deed is filed." He didn't ask why. People in finance rarely ask why when you speak their language. 3 weeks later, I signed the closing documents in a quiet office with fluorescent lights and coffee that tasted like cardboard. I used the funds I'd saved over 3 years, working, cutting corners, eating off-brand cereal, and wearing the same thrift store coat until the cuffs thinned out. When the notary passed me the final page and said, "Congratulations, homeowner," I didn't feel pride. I felt clarity. I held the deed in both hands and just stared at my name in bold print, Jessica A. Taylor. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't even have to change the last name. Back in my apartment, I laid the deed next to my FAFSA acceptance letter, still creased from years ago. Danielle video called me later that night. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "It's just strange." "Strange how?" I bought the house I was supposed to inherit, with money they stole from me. Danielle raised a brow. Some folks spend years trying to close their emotional loops. You just used escrow. We both laughed, but there was an ache under mine. The eviction process wasn't cruel. It was administrative. I filed paperwork at the courthouse the next Monday. I didn't use expedited service. I gave them the full 45 days to respond. Legally, that was all they were entitled to. Still, I sat in my car for over an hour that afternoon, parked down the street from 148 Sycamore Lane. Summer had softened the edges of the neighborhood. Kids were chalking suns and spirals onto driveways. Wind chimes sang from porches. And there, walking up the cracked steps, were Barbara and Tom Taylor, my parents. They looked older. Maybe it was the debt, or maybe it was me. Barbara held a grocery bag in one hand and a phone in the other, mid-conversation. Dad trailed behind, keys in hand, wearing the same weathered sandals from every summer of my childhood. They didn't see me, and I didn't want them to. Not yet. I looked at the mailbox as they disappeared inside. The Taylors, for now. The morning air felt heavy with late summer dew. I parked 2 houses down from where I used to live, the engine ticking as it cooled. My breath fogged slightly on the windshield, and through it I could just make out the mailbox that still read The Taylors. Our family name, but not our family home, at least not theirs anymore. The envelope sat on the passenger seat beside me, yellow tape folded neatly. The notice was typed and printed on plain white paper. Clean, legal, binding. Danielle had double-checked every line. No mistakes, no loopholes. I stared at it one last time before stepping out. Their camper was still in the driveway, polished, proud, the same one they traded my NYU acceptance for. The porch light was still on, even though the sun was rising. I walked up the drive with slow, even steps. I didn't look in the windows. I didn't need to see them. At the door, I pressed the paper against the wood. The tape stuck quickly, smooth across the top edge. A small bubble formed in the middle, and I smoothed it down with my palm. I stood there for a moment, listening. No movement inside, just the quiet hum of morning, the soft trill of a bird somewhere behind the garage. When I turned back toward the car, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Like placing the notice on the door had finally drawn a line I'd been circling my whole life. It wasn't revenge, it was a boundary, and it was mine. I was halfway back to the apartment when my phone buzzed. Dad. I let it ring. The second time, I picked up. Jessica, what the hell is this? His voice cracked, raw with disbelief. An eviction notice? You think this is funny? No, I said calmly. I think it's legal. You're evicting your own parents? His voice rose. After everything we've done for you? You spent my future on a camper, I said. This is just following through. There was a silence, then a scoff. You've changed. I didn't respond. He hung up. I expected that to be the end of it for the day. I was wrong. Just after 3 p.m, a knock rattled my apartment door. I checked the peephole. Mom. I opened it just enough to block the hallway behind me. She was holding the notice in her hand like it was burning through her skin. Her eyes were puffy and her voice trembled. Jess, tell me this is a mistake. It's not. You're actually kicking us out? I'm not kicking anyone, I said. I'm enforcing the deed I legally own. Her shoulders slumped. We were just trying to live, take one trip while we still had time. One trip that cost me my education. You could have taken loans. You could have asked, I said, my voice still low. You could have been honest. She looked around my apartment, her eyes pausing on the water-stained ceiling corner. This is how you live now? Ramen and thrift stores? This is how I live when I'm not someone else's backup plan. I thought you understood, she said, voice softening. I thought you knew how hard it was. I do, I interrupted. That's why I'm not asking you to leave tomorrow. You have 30 days. That's more than I got when I found out the fund was gone. She blinked, like the fairness of it was somehow crueler. "You'll regret this someday," she said, barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. As she turned and walked down the hall, I noticed her coat was the same one she wore the day we toured NYU together. She had insisted on coming, said she wanted to see the dream up close. I wonder now if she already knew it wouldn't happen. Back inside, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the spot on the wall where I used to tape up photos of college campuses. Most were gone now. Just a faint outline of blue tack residue remained. There's a quote Danielle once shared with me, something from her contracts class. "Boundaries aren't walls. They're agreements that say, I value myself enough to walk away from what breaks me." That notice wasn't a wall. It was my line in the sand, and I wasn't stepping back. Fall arrived like a whisper that year. Cooler mornings, early dusks, and courthouse steps slick with leaves. I sat in the back of the county courtroom, hands folded in my lap, while the fluorescent lights hummed above like a slow, steady metronome. Justice, I'd learned, didn't always roar. Sometimes it sounded like paperwork sliding across a wooden bench. The judge adjusted her glasses. "Miss Taylor, you're the legal property owner of 412 Maple Drive. You've submitted the proper eviction documentation?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, standing. My voice didn't shake, not because I wasn't nervous, but because the nervousness had been wrung out of me months ago, like a damp washcloth hung to dry. I had become something different since all this started. Still me, but steelier. Danielle sat 2 rows behind, her face calm, her arms crossed. She didn't speak, but I could feel her presence like a steadying hand at my back. Tom sat across the aisle. He didn't look at me. His shirt was too tight around the neck, like he'd grabbed it in haste. Barbara sat beside him, small and still, eyes fixed on the judge like she was hoping the woman would suddenly offer grace in exchange for silence. They hadn't hired a lawyer, just printed emails and folded papers in a file folder that looked like it had been at the bottom of a drawer. They came with emotion. I came with evidence. Tom stood when the judge motioned. His words tumbled, rough and cracked with frustration. "She's our daughter. She was going to inherit the house anyway. We never imagined she'd throw us out." The judge remained neutral. "Mr. Taylor, regardless of familial relations, the matter before us is about lawful property ownership and tenant status. Emotional appeals do not negate legal contracts." Tom turned toward me, but I didn't meet his gaze. I looked at the floor, the walls, the judge, anywhere but at the man who once said, "Trust us. It's all for your future." Barbara didn't say a word, not once during the entire hearing. She clutched her bag and stared ahead like she was somewhere else entirely. The ruling didn't take long. Eviction stands. All legal notices have been served within appropriate time frame. Judgment in favor of Ms. Taylor. Just like that, a quiet sentence, a stamp, a subtle pause. Then it was done. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled like wet bark and something distant, like a wood stove 2 blocks away. Tom pushed past without a word. Barbara hesitated. For a moment, I thought she might say something, but she just gave me a tired look, one I couldn't read anymore, and followed him into the parking lot. Danielle and I sat on the stone wall near the courthouse fountain. She handed me a bottle of water and said nothing. That was her gift, knowing when words would only clutter the moment. "I'm not sure what I expected," I said finally. "Justice doesn't always come with balloons," she replied. "Sometimes it's just closure in a manila folder." We laughed, but it didn't feel triumphant. Just real. That night, I sat cross-legged on my apartment floor sorting mail. Most of it was junk, credit card offers and subscription ads. But buried in the pile was a small envelope, addressed in round teenage handwriting. I froze. The return address said me, no last name, just a date, 2015. I'd written it when I was 14, one of those school assignments. Write a letter to your future self. I must have forgotten I scheduled it to be mailed back through a time capsule program. I peeled it open. Inside, "Hey Jess, I hope you're still drawing. I hope you got into NYU. I hope you're brave, even if it costs you everything." I sat very still. That was the part that undid me. Not the courtroom, not the yelling, not even the look on Barbara's face. It was that sentence, written in purple gel pen by a girl who still believed the future was hers by default. I cried. For the first time since all of it began. Not the kind of crying that rattles your chest, just quiet tears, soft and steady, like rain tapping against a windowsill. I didn't feel guilty. I felt clear, like I'd just come through fog. The next morning, Danielle texted while I was reheating leftover pasta. "There's a fellowship opening. Financial education for at-risk youth. Want to apply?" I stared at the screen, the phone glowing in my palm like a question I hadn't thought to ask myself yet. The key slid into the lock without resistance. I turned it slowly, the metal mechanism catching with a sound I remembered from years ago. That soft click, the faint creak as the door opened. It all felt familiar and strange at once. The house was quiet. Not the kind of quiet you get when someone steps out to run an errand. This was the stillness of absence, of walls that had absorbed everything and were now waiting to be filled with something new. It was January 2024. Outside, the trees were bare, but the sky was a clear blue, and sunlight streamed through the front windows, casting pale yellow rectangles onto the hardwood floors. The air inside smelled faintly of dust and old cinnamon, the kind of scent that lingers after holidays and time. I stepped in and closed the door behind me. The living room looked smaller than I remembered, maybe because the furniture was gone, maybe because the weight of expectations no longer filled the corners. I moved slowly, letting my fingers brush against the wall as I walked past, the same wall Dad once joked had my fingerprints on every inch. He was right, but now they were mine again. I walked room to room. The guest room still had curtain rods up, the kind with the little plastic ends shaped like pine cones. My old bedroom was empty, but the faded outlines of posters I'd taped up as a teenager were still visible, faint rectangles on the wall like shadows of someone else's dreams. In the kitchen, I paused. The table was gone, but the grooves in the linoleum floor where its legs once stood remained. I opened a drawer and found an old recipe box. The lid stuck, but it gave way with a nudge. Inside, handwritten index cards, Mom's looping cursive, and there it was. Jess's pie, slow bake, cinnamon crust. My throat tightened. I sat on the kitchen floor and held the card in both hands. It smelled faintly of cloves. She'd labeled it yours like she'd meant to pass something down, even if it was just dessert. I stood up, brushed myself off, and took the card to the countertop. Set it down gently, then pulled open the envelope I'd brought with me. Inside, blueprints. Not of furniture, not for remodeling. These were plans for a community space, financial literacy, free workshops, walk-in consultations. Danielle had helped me draw them up. I unfolded them carefully, smoothing the edges against the counter. Then I pulled out my phone and called Kenton. "I'm in," I said, my voice calm. "Let's build something better." There was a pause, then a smile in his voice. "I thought you'd say that. I'm 5 minutes away." He showed up with 2 coffees and a notebook filled with ideas. We sat at the counter, me on the old bar stool that still wobbled, him flipping through the pages. We didn't talk much at first, just compared sketches, made notes. The heater kicked on with a low rattle. Somewhere in the house, a door settled into its frame. At one point, I stood and walked to the hallway closet, pulled out a can of paint I'd brought from my apartment. The color was soft gray, warm, not cold. I found a brush in the kitchen drawer and dipped it without thinking. In the hallway, there was a thin crack that had always run just above the baseboard. I remembered tracing it as a child, pretending it was a river on a map. No one ever fixed it. Not really. I crouched, dipped the brush again and painted over it, slowly. Not for anyone else, just because I could. Later, Kenton and I stood at the front doorway looking out at the street. Snow flurries had begun, light as powdered sugar. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. Better than okay. He handed me my coffee, now lukewarm. "It's a good house." I looked around one more time, at the blueprints, the recipe card, the half-painted wall. "I didn't buy this house to throw them out," I said, almost to myself. "I bought it to finally walk in, as me." I didn't expect closure to come with the scent of cinnamon and old paint, but standing there, brush in hand, I realized healing doesn't always need an apology. Sometimes it just needs space and the courage to use it. In life, we're told to honor family, but real love doesn't erase accountability. It invites it. And sometimes building something better means starting from scratch, even when it hurts. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to know, whether it's a memory, a lesson, or simply a feeling. You're welcome to share your thoughts below. Maybe, like me, you're just trying to walk back through the door, as yourself.